Hello, this is Augie Macro with Cryptid Creatures. This episode we're going to be talking about one of the most famous cryptids, Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. The story of the Loch Ness Monster has been around for a very long time. Some of the first recorded sightings were from the 1st century AD. Loch Ness Monster is from a very remote location. It's from Loch Ness in Scotland. But it has other relatives that are from all over the world. Things like Champ from New York and Vermont, Memphrey from Canada, Ogopogo in British Columbia, and many others. There are many different photos of the Loch Ness Monster that have been taken over the years. There's the most famous one, the nurse's photo. It's called that because it was taken by a nurse. It's brought up a lot of skeptical opinions. Some think that it was the real thing. Others think it was a piece of cardboard put into the water. But one of the largest theories, and it's actually been proven this, that it's really a toy submarine that was placed into the water, and with the combination of the top of it sticking out of the water and the backlighting from the sun, it becomes a silhouette of a lake monster. There are some very unique things about it. It has two horn-looking things, which are probably used for breathing. It has an excellent sense of sight and smell, and it has razor-sharp teeth that it's able to use to stab into fish that it supposedly eats. These animals, in my opinion, would be unlikely to exist because, for one, Loch Ness doesn't have very much room for a population of large marine animals. Two, it's mostly silt at the bottom and there isn't much fish. So, therefore, an animal this large would be unlikely to survive in it, unless it lived in the sea and came into it. The Loch Ness Monster many times has been described as something like an elasmosaurus, a prehistoric marine reptile from the end of the age of dinosaurs. We have a special guest that has been to the loch and grew up in Scotland. His name is Grant Gallagher. We're going to get his opinion.
Hey Augie, and thanks very much for inviting me on your show. I really appreciate it. So, the Loch Ness Monster, eh? Well, the Loch Ness Monster, as you know, is known up here in Scotland as Nessie. And what you might not know is that she has a sister who lives in the nearby Loch Morar in the Lochaber part of Scotland, who's called Morag. Now, Nessie and Morag are both portrayed as the kind of Pliocene dinosaurs that you've got on the chart behind you, but there probably isn't very much evidence for that. One of the earliest attempts to make it seem like there was a monster in Loch Ness was by an English doctor who made up a photo, who faked a picture, and this is that famous picture. This one's taken from the BBC News, a famous picture, but it turned out that that was a complete fake, and what he had done was he had made a model submarine and dragged a stick through the water. Now, there have been a lot of attempts to look and see whether there is anything in the loch, and one of the best attempts was to take a complete sonar picture of the whole of the loch from one end to the next, looking for things like big creatures or whatever it was, but nothing was found. The water in Loch Ness is actually not very good at supporting life. It's very still, it's very dark, and it's very cold. However, scientists from New Zealand very recently undertook a study using a technique called environmental DNA sampling. And what they did was they took samples of the water from all over Loch Ness, and they extracted the DNA, and they looked to see what creatures the DNA was from. And while they found evidence of DNA from birds and fish and stuff like that, the vast majority of the DNA that they found was from eels. So these scientists from Otago in New Zealand came to the conclusion that if there was a very large creature living in Loch Ness, it was most likely to be a very large eel. And that's where the science leaves us. But of course, science is one thing. tradition and myth and intrigue are completely something else. So we all want there to be a monster in Loch Ness, and we all want there to be Nessie, and we all want there to be people like you investigating these things for many years to come. Thanks again for letting me on your show, Augie. Congratulations with it. I look forward to seeing it. Bye for now.
Many of these lake monsters look very much like prehistoric animals that had lived in the water at that time. Some of them look very much like animals that have been seen in lakes all over the world. For example, the Iliamna lake monster in Alaska looks very much like many types of fish living today and in the past. For example, coelacanth are a good example of what they look like. The Inkinyamba of South Africa look very much like giant snakes that lived in the time right after the dinosaurs. Nahuelito and the Loch Ness Monster are very similar. They look very much like plesiosaurs, like the Selasmosaurus from the time at the end of the dinosaurs. The Lagerflute worm from Iceland looks very much like many types of serpents, snakes, sometimes even thought of as a giant worm, quite literally. Memphre from Canada looks very similar to the Loch Ness Monster. Altamahaha looks practically nothing like any of these. It has 2 fins and a diamond-shaped tail, which has never been seen before in prehistoric animals. Closest thing I could think of is something like this mosasaur. Tessie from Nevada also looks very much like a plesiosaur. Chessie from the Chesapeake Bay is more like this Hydrotherosaurus. Caddy is a marine animal from British Columbia near Vancouver. They look like nothing like these. They have a horse-like head and a dolphin-like body. Ogopogo is more serpentine. So I would say probably a mosasaur like this Tylosaurus would be a good example of something that the Ogopogo would look like. Champ, which is from New York and Vermont, has been described as something like this Crypticlidus or this Plesiosaurus. Whippy, which is another marine animal that lives in Lake Champlain, which is where they're from, looks very much like a sea lion. Peppy from Wisconsin is much more slender than the plesiosaurs, and Tanystropheus, a prehistoric marine lizard with an extremely long neck from the beginning of the age of dinosaurs, would be a good example of what it looked like. And Charlie, also known as Slimy Slim from Idaho. You could describe it as possibly a combination of a plesiosaur with this small ichthyosaur, Ophthalmosaurus. So as you can see, many of these prehistoric animals resemble what people have been seeing in lakes and rivers all over the world. Thanks for watching the show. Hope you get to watch our next episode and have seen our previous one. Our sponsors are the Kitty Putters Union and the Cobble Sound Recording Company. Thanks for watching Cryptid Creatures with Augie Macro. Signing off.